Hey everyone, I am Daisy McGowan. I'm the director of GOCA, the Galleries of Contemporary Art at UCCS, and this is our virtual studio visit series. And today we are lucky to be here with Elizabeth Selby, live from her studio in her home. And Elizabeth is based here in Colorado Springs, and we invited her to be part of the series to just share some of her process and see what she's up to. Our goal with this new series was to give artists a platform and a space for sharing their work, connecting, all those things that we're not really getting to do as artists and art people right now. And so, thank you, Elizabeth, for opening up. I'm not sure. Have you ever had a virtual studio visit before?
Aside from maybe like doing it once on Instagram, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's not super common. Like it's actually a pretty kind of it's kind of a vulnerable space, right? Like the space where you're in process and making art. It's already vulnerable enough to put your work in the world as an artist. And so I do want to say I really appreciate your taking a chance on this. I think so far we've heard a lot of great feedback from folks that they're getting a lot out of this from other artists, from art fans. And so I hope it's meaningful for you too. And it's been really meaningful for me as a curator. This is one of my favorite parts of my job. In the regular course of work, I do about 200 studio visits a year. So part of me was really kind of worried about losing that pace. It is, as a contemporary art curator, sort of nonstop as far as trying to find out what's going on and taking a pulse and then just learning from artists. I learned so much from artists. Um, so having said all that, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background? How did you end up in Colorado Springs, and where are you, and where are you making work out of right now?
Well, I am from Alabama. I was born and raised there for I lived there 21 years of my life. Then I went to college and I was a counseling major, so very not artistic in college. And moved to Colorado Springs after I got married because my husband was in the army. And he's from here, so we moved here. And yeah, I've pretty much just been doing some form of um, creating like my whole life. Like, that's my background as far as art goes. Like, pretty much every craft or, um, you know, art discipline I have played with, like, from a really young age. So my mom really fanned that flame, like, growing up. And I think by doing like pottery and metalworking and quilting and just like literally you name it, I did it. I think all of that really informed my work and really, like, it's all cumulative, like learning how to use your hands and how to be patient and how to like finish a project and just like all those things I think contributed to where I ended up, which is painting. And then I think I just really settled into painting. Painting is like my medium. Just makes sense to me. But right now I'm in my studio, which is usually my studio, but right now it is also an office for my husband who works in here during the day. So sometimes we're both in here and sometimes we're not because he's zooming all day. So sometimes I'm not in here for that. But yeah, so that's where I'm at.
Yeah, we were talking about being really honest about our situations. We're all making do, and artists are especially good at that of making work in every situation. You've been making pretty large scale paintings, out of your home for a while. I know you've sometimes had different maybe spaces you could paint in, like the SPQR space at points. You've gotten creative with figuring out, all that, but it also, obviously is economical to kind of have your studio based out of your home. I am in my garage slash studio shared with my husband, and I was talking before we started recording that it's the only space that has some sound separation, and so we're all just sort of making do. So that's why there's a scythe over my head right here.
That's what that is.
That was left over from the previous owner. I have yet to use that particular tool, but it's an interesting shape.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
Well, that's interesting that your studio space is sort of taken over by Sharon. Obviously, your husband's temporarily working from home, I'm guessing,
Hmm.
and so the energy's got to have shifted a lot. Has that impacted? Like, do you work sort of around the times that he's in there, or?
Um, honestly, since the quarantine, it's my pace has been a little bit slower creatively. I think it's shifted to other things. I think it's shifted to more like crafty things lately and less painting. Partially because, my studio is like a fraction of the size it was. And partly just because it's really hard to wrap my mind around starting a new project right now or um, doing what I normally do, which is kind of involved and has a lot of process and steps. So, yeah, I would say lately he hasn't really been the biggest factor being in here. It's mostly just been, um, yeah, it's hard to wrap my mind around like starting anything new. Or I've tried finishing a few things I had started, but I've been doing a lot of really small things um, like this small.
Is that like a focus issue? Is there a thing going on in the world with the pandemic?
Yeah, I think it's just like it's been really good for me to start something and see it through in the same day.
Mm.
Um, Normally, my process is pretty long,
Mhm.
and I love that. Like, that's everything to me. But I think right now it's just like I can't think past my nose. And so, doing something in the same day, like a sketch or a little small painting that I'm putting zero pressure on, has been just like the best thing for me. Or starting other projects like jumping on the sourdough train or things like that.
Train too.
Yeah. So doing things like that has just been, I think, really healing and good for me. And I think everybody needs to take a break from their norm sometimes. But um, yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to embrace like how I feel and like let these emotions like play out. And I think it will inform my work when that time comes. And I need to just like be kind to myself right now. And um, as these feelings come and go, because it's a lot of like everybody's feeling this.
Mhm.
So just trying to be kind to myself.
Yeah, I actually was just on Instagram and saw two different artists writing about how they're mostly making smaller work right now. And these are artists who are known for working at a larger scale, painters in particular. So maybe there's just something that's, I know it's always challenging to face that big blank canvas. It's exciting, right? It's like full of potential, but maybe I like your way of describing that it's something that you can sort of achieve within a day. And so it probably feels um, like you're making work in a way that's fulfilling, but it's lowering the expectation to take on a sometimes month project, right? Some of your first paintings that I came across were actually in New American Paintings, and you were painting food and those were pretty large scale, weren't they?
Yeah, I think the largest was 48 inches. Yeah.
Yeah. So like 4 feet, um, and they were, um, pretty zoomed in. Like I remember the drippy cheeseburger and just really lovely handling of paint. And that was when you kind of first started painting, right? Pretty early on.
Yeah, that was literally my first taste of oil paint. I was really doing the food to learn how to paint with color and texture, and you really can't get more different textures and more different colors than food and junk food and candy. So that's kind of how that was born. And I didn't really see it back back then I wasn't thinking of it as like a body of work even. I was just having a blast. So I'm trying to keep thinking like that. I
Mhm.
try to keep um, just following where the fun is, and just what, like, my whole approach with the food was I was really just trying to learn, and it was fun. Like, everybody loves food. um, but there really wasn't more than that. It wasn't me. I wasn't really saying anything. I wasn't really using my voice. And so since then, I'd say that was more technical, and now I'm just like growing and trying to find my voice and use it.
Yeah, well, you clearly got a lot of recognition for your technical abilities. And I would say that, your ability to sort of focus in on a subject area like that, even if you yourself weren't projecting a concept or a vision with it, it has fast food just is loaded with, so much symbolism from their culture that people are going to tap into that, all kinds of, meaning. And it made the work pretty interesting, I think. And it's a pretty big deal to get into new American paintings. You were pretty young at the time, I think. Um, and so, anyways, it was probably pretty heartening. I don't know. You know, it sounds like for you, the work that you're doing more recently is more meaningful. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say so. And I think one thing that the food paintings taught me that you just mentioned is that, like, there is a lot packed into it, whether you intend to or not. And so um, I think having hindsight, like when I do a body of work like that, in hindsight, I feel like I see so much, and I see far more when I look back at what I've done than looking ahead at what I'm about to do. I think I see painting, especially now, as like such a form of self discovery. And obviously, it's me expressing something, but I usually see it after the fact, especially after I've made a larger body of work or several pieces. Like, it wasn't until like a year or two later, after I did this self portrait, I think it might have been my first self portrait that I did. I looked back at it like a year or two later and thinking about the season that I was in when I painted that, and it just made so much sense. And it just like, it gave me a lot more empathy for myself too.
Hmm. Do
And
you have
so
that on your website?
I
That
do.
self portrait? Yeah, maybe we could take a look at it. 'Cause it's hard for people to kinda understand in the abstract.
Mhm.
And we're also being honest that we're doing this in a very lo-fi Zoom recording, and so um, we're all sort of learning a new way to do this as we go.
Yeah, I think
Or if you want, we could just jump into your portrait series.
I have it pulled up now. Can you see it?
Okay, yep.
Yeah, so that was um, for me, taking these images. I mean, I took this image by myself in my loft, and
The image that you painted from.
yeah, the reference photo.
Hmm.
And I took a lot of different images that day with this blanket on this stool, and that's part of my process. Is I take a lot of photos, and kind of maybe even like 200 photos sometimes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just like depends on what I feel like doing that day and how much fun I'm having. And so um, I usually narrow it down to just one. I don't typically like to do a lot of similar images. So this is the one I chose, and I that's like such an important part of my process, the part where I select the image, because it's whichever one I feel really I connect with emotionally, and um, kind of describes how I feel. And I don't really have words for how I feel most of the time, which is the whole reason that I paint. So yeah, this image just really, um, I felt like I connected with it on a totally different level than any of the other images. So
Was this also at a larger scale, the painting?
this painting is actually 20 by 24
Oh
inches.
yeah, I can see right there. So it's a little bit more modest scale. It's
Yeah.
interesting because you're really obviously working still with a lot of texture and color with that blanket and the chair and but yeah, with that dramatic lighting and the way you've kind of set it up with the composition and then dropping the background out, really, um, it definitely has an emotional quality. It's very kind of cinematic.
Mm, yeah, I love that. Um,
Like there's a story there you kind of want to know more about. There's a lot of mystery for sure.
yeah, also just funny, I made the quilt that's in this
Oh, you did
painting.
that?
I made that and I made this stool.
Wow.
So it makes me love it. It's actually probably my favorite painting to this day of myself that I've done. But um, yeah, so it means a lot for a lot of reasons. But
Well, I remember when I first had a studio visit with you in person, and I had reached out to you because I um, saw your work in New American Paintings, which is a publication that I look at quite frequently as a curator of contemporary art, and was really excited to find an artist in Colorado Springs. And you said, well, you had shared you move on from the food painting um, as a concept and had started working with portraiture.
mhm.
Oh wow, that's lovely. I love that pool of yellow.
I just
Was
thought I'd keep the
um,
images moving.
what's that?
I just thought I would change up the images.
No, I think it's great. Yeah, let's keep going. Do you want to talk about? Did you do a whole series of these?
I did. Um, this was probably, yeah, I did mostly self portraits in this series and a lot of experimenting with the cutouts of paper, which um, really was just me, again, having fun with the process. And I really have this strong aversion, as you can tell from this Zoom call, and my not proficiency with things, but I really don't like using the computer. And I'm not very good at it, honestly. So a lot of this is born out of that. Um, and I like to use paper as my references anyways,
Mm-hmm.
instead of my iPad.
Do you
So
mean when you mean cut paper and using that instead of the computer? Are you talking about you're actually like using kind of collage elements when you construct the painting? Not actually
um,
the painting, but as like the composition.
right, yeah, I love playing with the composition by I'll print out the image that I've taken of myself, and then from there I will just play with paper, construction paper, scissors, tape, stickers, pins.
So that's how it gets that really lovely sort of line around the edge. That's kind of like almost like just a cut paper line. It doesn't
Yeah,
the
and,
yellow circle in particular I'm talking about, yeah.
right. And I end up um, painting it, and I'll show you a more recent one because the last one I just showed you was from 2017, and this one is from last year. Um, you can see it.
Yeah. Yeah, we can see it.
But yeah, I basically printed out the image of myself and then cut myself sort of out, and then the green area was just like a piece of paper, like green piece of paper,
Hmm.
and I was just playing around with the composition and like the depth and things like that, and then I'd paint it.
Do you use yourself as a model? Is that sort of like a practical concern? Sort of obviously you're pretty accessible to yourself. Or are there other reasons that you're particularly interested in using yourself as the model? Because I see you don't have it titled self-portrait, it's titled Ophelia. So obviously it is a self-portrait.
Right. A lot of times it started out that way. with um, somebody was like, "Why haven't you done a self-portrait yet?" And
Hmm.
I think my mentor had asked me that, and I had never thought about it. So this might have been my first or second. This is maybe was my second self-portrait. Sorry, I'm very bad at remembering, but um, so really, I just did it just to see what it would be like, and then I realized that it's even less of a barrier
Hmm.
to express an emotion or a narrative rather than having one more layer between me and the viewer of like me explaining to a model or hoping that a model shows the feeling that I want.
Hmm.
So it's funny because I've gotten the most, I don't want to say criticism, but I've got a lot of flack for being a self-portrait painter, more than I would have thought. And
From who's giving you flag?
I mean, just I wouldn't say other artists. I would say they usually get it, but just random people. I mean, not anyone close to me, but it's just little comments here and there, like, "Why do you always paint yourself?" Or,
Hmm.
um, which I don't always paint myself, but I think I just make a joke about it, and I usually just say, "Well, I'm obviously the most beautiful person in the world. That's why."
And that's probably what they're getting at, right? Is they're sort of not no not so much the beauty, but that there's maybe an implied narcissism or something like that, which I think is really lacks an understanding of the tradition of self-portraiture in painting. It's very much it's very psychological, as a subject matter, and the um, I think all most representational painters are going to take that on at some point, and it's a real challenge. I think we also all have our own baggage with self-portraiture. I don't remember in school, you know, you'd always have this art lesson if you're lucky to have art teachers, I suppose, where you need to, draw your self-portrait, uh,
Mhm.
and so maybe people are even bringing their own insecurities to it or something. But it sounds like they're projecting things on you and maybe lacking an understanding of the tradition in painting of portraiture and self-portraiture. Um,
Right, and I think there's a little bit of um, I'm not sure that those things are said to men because I can name several painters who
right.
primarily paint themselves that are men that I'm not really sure. Maybe they get the same comments. I don't know, but um, I think I, I'm not sure where it comes from, and I try to just laugh it off. And I don't think I let it get to me because I keep painting these self portraits. But um,
Yeah.
I've heard that a painter paints themselves no matter what the subject is. And I'm butchering the quote, but basically, like, no matter who you're painting or what you're painting, it's a painting of yourself. And I mean, why not paint myself then?
Well, and I think I would love to go back to the point you made about this additional barrier or layer for you as a painter. So you've talked about how the emotion is so important to you, like connecting emotionally with one of the studies, the photos first of all, but then also in the process of painting and then the finished work as well, being satisfied with that. And so I wonder if you can, I think for a lot of people, they just probably don't understand, like, how awkward is that to have a model? Like, you have to really build a level of trust with somebody for them to, I mean, it's awkward for us to be on a Zoom call, right? And have our heads really big and like be in each other's faces like this. And then, um, I'll just share personally, like, my son was making fun, he's a teenager, and he was making fun of my Zoom outtakes and how awkward I am. And it made me feel really self-conscious. And I was like, great, I'm putting these out in the world, but I just like want to let it go. But I've also modeled. It's a great tradition in art to be a model for painters and photographers, um, and there's a there's a conversation between the artist and the model that's so critical, um, that there's a level of trust. You're asking a lot of them. And if they're professional, if they've done it quite a few times, they're going to have a different level than if it's like somebody from your life, or, and then you've got the whole thing of like, what do they think of the finished work? There's whereas if it's you, like you said, obviously you can really play with the range of emotion and kind of get to the one that you really connect with and are excited about. And you also don't have to worry about like, how does she feel about this afterwards? Or, you know what I mean? Like, I think could you talk a little bit about like, do you have models that you use regularly? Are they friends? Are they family? Are they sort of more professional models, when you do work with other models?
Um, I do. I don't typically reuse models just because I like to change things up a lot. And every model that I've used, I will say, has been absolutely wonderful. So I really don't want to make it sound like, the models just don't get me or don't get what I'm saying. I'm just a very poor communicator, which is probably why I'm a painter. So I really have enjoyed working with these models. But if you can
Well,
be
I
my,
think maybe another way to think about it is not so much that you're a poor communicator, but it's actually hard to communicate something you don't even know exactly what it is until you see it, right? Or feel it.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so when I select models, I will say it has less to do with how they look. Um, and I feel the same way about painting myself. I've never thought of it so much as how I look. It's always been about emoting something. And so the models that I pick are usually people that I connect with on a deeper level. And even if I don't know them like very well, I feel a connection with them. And this picture right here, her name is Karen. She's actually a photographer, and she helped me take a lot of images from this series. She this was in her studio actually, and then I took that image, and then this is another girl, Kendall. She um, actually lives in Denver, but yeah, I usually take a lot of images of my models, like more than I would take of myself, and then you know it's the process is the same. I just hopefully there's an image in there that I connect with and is saying basically what I want to say. But I took most of the images of myself just with the tripod.
Are these last two that you showed are going more in this collage direction? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this I really just had fun playing with the different picture planes and seeing how I could um, make it look like you know there was a lot more depth and yeah, I think it's just easier for me to play with the composition and the narrative, like the storytelling aspect, by cutting things out and just having that time, sort of having that alone time with it, with the scissors and the other things other than oil paint. I don't really like to experiment with oil paint. I like to experiment with, well, one, cheaper things like paper, but it's just I go into this totally different zone whenever I'm doing these collages, or like with the Ophelia piece. I just like, yeah, I feel like I can think better when I have like actual textile things in my hands instead of, playing with composition on my laptop or with oil paint, because as soon as oil paint is involved, I'm like a different person. Like there's a different artist who's making this collage with her hands and the tape and the scissors, and as the one who's sitting in front of her easel with the oil paint.
Mm.
So I like accessing both sides of that. And um, obviously, one is a little more serious, and one is a little bit more like connected to playfulness and childhood and just freedom. And and then I get serious because I want to then um, I don't want to say immortalize it forever. What's the word I'm looking for? Like,
Well, you've
uh,
committed. It sounds like you're committing to an approach or a composition, a
right.
palette, a color scheme, or the whole layout. You're not. Is it right when you start painting that you're not really switching direction mid painting? You're really taking the vision that you've allowed yourself to really be loose and playful and try a lot of different approaches, but then you're able to take that and just really commit and go in one direction with the work that you want to paint.
Exactly. Like I think for me, as soon as I have a an oil paintbrush in my hand, I I think there's a lot of anxiety for me around changing course.
Mm.
And I took a class in Brooklyn with this painter, Casey Ball, and he's an excellent painter. And he just said something that stuck with me. He's like, before you sit down, you need to have a plan because um, you really don't want to waste paint or time at that point if you have the resources available to figure it out ahead of time. Like, and that's not everybody's practice. And sometimes I wish it wasn't how I practice. Sometimes I wish I had more freedom on the canvas. And I really admire a lot of painters who have that freedom and sort of exploration component to their paintings. But I just have accepted that that's not who I am, and I can't paint like that. So I try to have a lot of fun with it on the front end of things, and I think I've struck a balance that I'm happy with.
I hear you using words like fun and play with with the collage components. Could you show us? I know you have a piece on your desk there that you shared earlier that could hold up. So
Legs.
that's a printout, cutout, yeah.
Yes, and this was the original. So many things. This was the original. So, oh no! I literally am burning my house down.
Oh gosh.
It's fine now. Put it on top of a candle. Um, so this was the cutout that I had put on a white piece of paper. It was the other way.
Oh, yep.
I printed that out, and then I just like was trying to figure out my composition for the piece that I showed before. I can share it again in a second. So this is kind of how I just work things out, like pen and paper, and it's really just from not being able to work a computer, which I did attempt Photoshop several times and things like Photoshop several times, and I just don't enjoy it. It's not that I can't figure it out. I mean, some of it's that I can't figure it out, but I really just don't enjoy it. So I just decided, what am I trying to do?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
what
What's
is,
your goal?
yeah.
No,
So,
that makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that if your goal is to play, that doing it in a way that feels comfortable and familiar and easy versus hard and frustrating and annoying, you know, which a computer process can be for people. If it's not a fluent language for you, but the way you described growing up with your mom, you were crafting, you were cutting paper and making things with your hands. That seems like the comfort place for you. So it makes sense to me. You're talking about your childhood basically, and where does play come from? Play is like such a essential part of learning for us as kids. And I think a lot of people honestly have a beef with artists because they're jealous they get to play, but obviously um, it's just actually more and more people are recognizing play as this very important process in creativity. And it makes sense to me that you would do it in the format that feels best for you. And I really love seeing that process, by the way. That's like also like I guess printer ink is kind of expensive, but it's pretty low cost. Like you said, oil paints are pricey. um, and then you have cut paper that you bring into it, like bright colors of different paper.
Yes, I have this thing of paper back here, which I usually have magazines and different um, art magazines and things. I actually got rid of them when Blaze moved in here, my husband, to work, because I had to clean out a bunch of stuff. So I was like, I don't need all of these old things. So I can't really show you most of that. But just imagine a complete heap of papers and magazines and bird books. I don't know, just everything.
Collage materials.
Collage materials,
Yeah.
found items. Um, so yeah, I also like leaving room because, like I said, I get a little more anxious in front of the canvas to play and make mistakes or explore. So like I try to leave room for like happy accidents that would normally happen when you're painting if you are that type of painter who doesn't have a plan going into it. There's usually these magical moments or happy accidents where things happen, and maybe some of them you keep and some of them you don't.
Mhm.
But I feel like that happens for me when I'm cutting out or piecing things together, or something doesn't quite print out how I wanted it to, or I cut too far, or just things like that, where like it ends up looking better than originally. So for me, that's where I kind of leave the extra room for the magic to happen. And so much of what has ended up on a canvas is not things I intended. It's just like I loved that it ended up that way. But um,
And
yeah,
I love,
that's
yeah, photography is that at that point where you can really use it as a tool, a generative tool, in a way that, even when I was younger, it was actually quite expensive. And now with digital photography, it's such a gift as far as being able to take endless photographs and sort of allow yourself to play and not worry about the financial aspects of it, or even the technical. It took forever to get something printed, or if you printed it yourself, you had to have a dark room, and so things are just, there's an ease with it. So in some ways, you are using a ton of technology, right? But then you're taking it into a low tech format to really um, for that exploration, experimentation.
right. Like in this piece, I'll show you that we just looked at. Even just like the lo-fi-ness, I wanted to keep that. I don't know if you can tell that it sort of almost looks like it's gone through a filter. The image of me that's sort
Hmm.
of like creamy, and um, the purple shadow behind me was basically because the ink wasn't doing well
Oh,
that.
that's interesting. So it's almost like an inkjet shadow color because we were running out of ink.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, so like things like that, and the fact that the image turned out much lighter than obviously the image on my iPhone would have looked if I was painting from my iPhone. I kind of love things like that, and that wasn't intended, but I fell in love with that. So, and then the hand is actually from a magazine, um,
Ah,
like an old magazine, and it was some person's hand around a woman's waist. And so, yeah, I just love things looking.
yeah, I love the planar shift on that hand. I could tell it was from some other reference point because it's breaking the plane, and there's obviously something else going on there. But I also, there's this kind of creepiness to it in a way. But then there's also that familiar gesture of like wrapping an arm around somebody. Um, yourself, the figure, which happens to be you, but the expression is a little bit um, almost maybe fearful or a little bit bewildered, or you're not
Mm,
quite sure the emotion. Like definitely looking at something off the composition that uh, there's there seems just a lot of narrative in your portraiture that I love, that the hand breaks through the planar barrier, and then it's also kind of telling a story about your process in a way, and more than I've seen in some of the other paintings, because you showed two larger portraits at GOCA about 4 years ago as part of our Great Expectations series. And these have gone in such an interesting direction. It's great to see you continue to experiment, and the background, that green, that texture is so lovely. How did you come up with that?
Thank you. That is painted pretty much how the paper was. It was a green piece of paper that had been folded, and um, I just really liked how it looked, and I added some of the texture. I don't think it was quite as linen looking of paper, but there was some texture I remember. But yeah, I love that. I was really just trying to make it look like paper, like some kind of textured paper.
So even that fold in the middle is from that actual piece.
Yeah, I painted it kind of looks like it might be the panel, but it's painted to look like the fold that was there.
I'm curious with the one that you showed us that was on your desk. Do you have an image of that one in process as well? Is that sort of, is that the next sort of larger work you're working on, or are you working on
Um,
a smaller series with those?
are you referring to this one?
Yes, there you go. The
Yes.
legs. You showed us the
This,
process with paper on your desk, and
yeah, this one was a little bit less. The only paper for this one that I used was the actual legs and arms cut out, and um, I figured out the composition just on a white piece of square paper because I knew it was going to be on a square canvas. But other than that, excuse me, I pretty much just layered the background and decided at the time I was um, really inspired by Joan Mitchell and looking at a lot of her work and just loved her violent um, feeling paintings, and I really related to those at the time. And so
mm,
I basically picked a color palette and went to town, and it was so fun. And just, I mean, fun is one way to describe it. It was um, a release in a lot of ways.
yeah, it's interesting because your figures are being sort of reduced or cut out more through this series than I've seen in the past. But then I also see that playfulness coming in here quite a lot. But whenever you see sort of body parts on a canvas, there's a little bit of, there's definitely an implied violence in that. Um, and so I'm
Yeah,
curious, you know,
I was thinking of it as like such an emotional state. Just like I like playing with the idea of like how much can I omit and still see the narrative? How much of the narrative remains, and how much of the female figure can I remove, and it still be, um, you know, a female figure? Like how much of it can I like? I think I'm going to keep heading in that direction of just, and I don't have anything I could show right now, but um, yeah, I just like diverging from the usual way that we see the female form
mm,
that we're just so obsessed with as a culture. And um,
you
I
know,
love,
oh, sorry to interrupt you. I was just thinking of what you said about, getting some pushback for, um, painting self portraits and being a woman. You feel like, maybe men don't get that same kind of pushback. And I'm wondering, um, I see, I love how you talked about how much can you strip this down as far as how much of the figure do you need to reference in a way for it to reference probably you, right? Because you are the female figure maybe that you're ultimately painting, if it's not necessarily even your body in there. Um, and then that you're allowed to, um, you know, really dive into that emotional state, which I hear you saying is really central to all of your painting. But that maybe when um, there's that distraction of the, you know, the of beauty, um, that people maybe don't see the psychological state you're trying to present as much, and this one really goes to that. Is that right?
That's that I would say that's exactly that's exactly it. It's just um yeah, I some of it a lot of it I think is pushback of like sometimes sometimes representational figurative or portrait work is seen as a little bit kitsch or on the nose or something like that. And um, I mean, I've heard it all, honestly, but some of it is pushback, like you said. It's just like, okay, how much of this do I remove? Like, and I can still get my point across. And it's just some of it is just fun playing around with the representational versus modern elements and seeing how I can marry those two things that have sometimes been opposed or just pinned against each other, but I love them both so much, and I don't think you should choose. I don't think we have to choose. And
Yeah, I'd love to see just like a grid, like a whole wall of these, and you just, you know, riffing. I love how there's that still that very low tech, you know, the cut collage. Like you're not trying to trick us that, you know, the arm still has its background and from the original photo. So there's an honesty in it, in what you're doing. I think it's very much like, um, an interesting, contrast or tension there with the, because you know you're taking a photo reference or collage reference, and then you're taking that into, representational painting, and there is an element of sort of like a painting is artifice in a way, right? Like it's by its nature it's representing,
right.
but then, you're honest about it, but you're also allowing us to really be transported with your technical skill, and then of your choices with composition. I mean, the toe is missing. Like, I don't really believe like you actually cut off this model's toe or your own toe. It looks to me like I can tell you're, you know, you're really being honest about your collage references, but then I can also really, um, and appreciate your handling of, the modeling of the flesh, and that whole tradition of painting of that references. But then you're taking it in this new direction. I'm really excited by this. It's really, I'm excited to see more. I hope you'll make more in this series. It sounds like you are.
Yeah, I would say I am planning on it. And the cutting off of the toe and the cutting of just random things, those are the happy accidents that I love. I love just like having a glass of wine and cutting out a figure and just like whatever happens happens, and I'm good with it. So this is the one that kind of started this direction. um, this was for my last show at SBQR last June, I believe. um, and just like marrying these two sort of ideas, like one, the blue background I did first, and I just I like being able to do both. I don't think I could quit doing representational work because I just enjoy it so much, but I also enjoy doing these very gestural painting lines. And it's really just comes from me not being able, I just don't want to pick. I just want to be able to do whatever I feel like doing, as basic as that is.
Well, I have to say, I've been really privileged to watch you develop as an artist, you know, since you were pretty young, and have a chance to work with you as far as showing your work, um, and seeing it develop. And I'm excited for you to be in a point where you're saying you don't want to choose, you know, you want to do what you want to do. I think that's a really important place for an artist to really kind of not feel like they have to ask for permission or, you know, do what's expected. Your work has a really strong voice right now, and I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should probably kind of wrap up here. I do have one last question for you. That's like kind of stepping back from the work a bit. You know, everybody is going through a challenging time right now for artists. I've been asking each of the artists that I talk with about obviously funding and a space to work are really important to be able to make work as an artist. And I'm proud to offer a modest stipend to every artist that's part of this series as part of that effort to lend some support right away to artists in our community. But I also wonder, is there anything else that you think you could use or that folks could understand that artists would need right now?
Hmm. Um, I was thinking about this, and it's interesting because I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I was just thinking, like, I can't think of a single artist who doesn't always need, we it's kind of the life of an artist can always be hard. As far as people I know in Colorado Springs that are working artists, and this definitely highlights that. And I think it's good to highlight that we need to be supporting our artists all the time. And I hope that this really encourages people to do that. But I would just ask, if you know an artist who might need help, just ask what they need. I mean, maybe what they need is for you to share what they have for sale, or maybe what they need is um, someone to talk to. I mean, like, every artist probably has different needs, and um, I mean, I'm sure financial is most people have that need right now. But yeah, I would just ask because it seems like everybody's in a different boat and might need different things. But sharing people's
That's
work never hurts.
that's good advice just generally for us all as humans, right? But I have heard from a number of artists that it's really meaningful when people buy their art, and especially if you're making smaller work right now, are you putting that on Instagram or how are you mostly sharing that out if people are interested in buying your work?
Um, I typically do an Instagram sale maybe a couple times a year. Everything is the rest of the time just by inquiry. So a lot of artists um, are also functioning like that. Like, if you see something on their Instagram or on their website that they have shared and you're interested in it, just ask them. And I would also say a lot of artists are very flexible with how you pay them. Like, a lot of artists will accept payments or work with you, or um, you know, it's not just like, if you can't afford it, then you know, too bad. Like, maybe just pay them once a month until you pay them, and then you get your painting. I've had several people do that with me, and there's always a way. It doesn't have to be, you know, like everything else.
Yeah, galleries offer that too, and a lot of people don't know that. And it can make art very accessible. I feel like every month out of the last 20 years I've been working in the arts, I've been paying one artist or another on some sort of payment plan. And now I have an amazing collection of art, and I'm really grateful for that. I think there's something really special about collecting art. It means a lot as an artist to have somebody bring your work into their environment, and they live with it. It's very intimate and meaningful. And of course the funding also is very important, but there's also that really special relationship, that it's a deep level of respect.
Yes, there's nothing like it, honestly. Um, but yeah, I feel like that I should have said that first. Buy art. I feel like that is just the best advice and the most obvious advice. But buy their art in whatever way that you can.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Because even if some artists might right now be doing little things, little sketches, even they put online or something. And um, I know we can mail things right now, or maybe deliver things curbside as artists.
Right.
um, right? Yeah, keep some distance. But I hope you're staying safe and sane. And it's really very much of a privilege to get to see this insight into your work, Elizabeth. I'm really grateful for your being so generous. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing these. I have really benefited from watching other people's that you've done in the last couple of weeks of just I feel like I really relate to where everybody all the other artists are at too. So thanks for putting that out there.
That's sort of our bigger goal, is to keep this community connected however we can, and we're trying different ways to do that. So I appreciate that feedback. That means a lot. And we'll be sharing this out on all our social media and our website, and hopefully folks can, we'll share your website as well so folks can contact you directly.
Thank you. Yes.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Daisy.